Hi, my name is Lucas and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Widgetbook. In this video, I'm going to give you a detailed overview of what the open source package Widgetbook does. Widgetbook helps you to build widgets in isolation and therefore allows you to build reusable components easily. We as developers are striving for building reusable components because we want to ensure that our users have a consistent user experience. And we also want to avoid that we build the same widget over and over again. How are we doing it nowadays? Nowadays, we're doing it by building our components straight into screens. And this approach is quite error-prone. It's error-prone because we are facing many distractions by surrounding widgets that can then influence my component. And because we have to design the API on the fly, we might add unnecessary dependencies to our components just because the surrounding widgets require them. Let's check an example workflow. Let's imagine we're building a collaborative counter app. I think all of us are familiar with the counter app from Flutter. And we as Widgetbook, we are building Widgetbook as an open source package and therefore, of course, believe in the power of community and collaboration. And that's why we always wanted to build a collaborative counter app. So we want to build this page and we're starting with our user avatar. We want to build it as a reusable component. What we can see here is now the code of our user avatar component. And this user avatar is implemented in a way that it depends on a user provider. And when we know the user from our provider, then we show the username. However, it has an issue. We made an incorrect assumption here because while the top right component is for the current user, the more recent contributor can be any collaborative member of my team. So as the user avatar component is reused here in the most recent contributor section of the screen, we either need to create another user avatar component now, or we refactor the existing one. And as we're aiming to build reusable components, we should refactor it. Here we can see our diagram that illustrates our issue a bit more. So here we can see that our user avatar component on the right heavily depends on information provided by the user model. And our user model gets this information from a Riverpod provider. Therefore, this component has a provider dependency. So let's go ahead and refactor it. In this case, our component was changed to feature any user instead of the already existing one. But now it depends on the user model. And that is being shown here. What we can see is that our user avatar depends on a user model, as we can see in our import statements and also in our class properties. And while this might work for most apps, in a design system that might be reused across multiple apps, it logically doesn't make a lot of sense that the design system here is aware of a data dependency, because the focus should be about the isolated component, not about data. And here we can see it in the diagram again. In our case, while our user avatar component does no longer depend on a provider dependency, it still has the user model dependency. And let's go ahead and refactor it again. So in order to reduce the dependency further, to make the component even more reusable, we now refactored it in a way that it no longer depends on a provider or any data model. It just depends on plain string inputs. And here we can see the diagram. Isn't it beautiful? It's very simple, reusable by any app, and it's fully isolated from providers, logic, or data elements. It's just perfect. And here we can see the comparison. So in the past, our user model depended on a Riverpod provider and on a user model, and now it only depends on plain string inputs. We could have had this success a lot sooner. The mistakes that we made were preventable. And how can we prevent these mistakes? Experienced developers usually build their own sandbox or debug page for themselves that allows them to build their widgets in isolation and without any distraction. However, building such a sandbox is time-consuming and leaves developers unsatisfied with a solution. That's why we built Widgetbook. Widgetbook is the environment to build components in isolation. For any of you that are coming from a web development background, you probably heard or likely even used Storybook.js before. It's exactly the journey where we as a team are coming from. All of us were web developers in the past, used Storybook.js, and when we eventually switched to Flutter, there was no Storybook solution out there. That's why we built Widgetbook. So you can also say Widgetbook is the Storybook for Flutter. And let's check out together how we can set it up. Let's set up Widgetbook in our Flutter project. We create a new folder, Widgetbook, on the same level as our lib folder. And we build it as a new Flutter app. In our Widgetbook folder, we have a pubspec YAML file, and that file includes our Widgetbook dependencies. First of all, it has our main Widgetbook dependency, and then also Widgetbook annotation and Widgetbook generator. So the name already suggests it comes with an annotation-based code generator, which works very similar to Freest. We have our first annotation that's important, it's our add-app annotation, and we are adding that in our main.dart file. And in here, we are then returning our Widgetbook, and that will automatically generate the UI of our Widgetbook for us. Afterwards, we can go ahead and add our component. First of all, we're doing, in order to build a component in isolation with Widgetbook, we are just adding it. We're just adding a placeholder here. So we are not returning anything meaningful yet, just a quick placeholder. Because we can then add this component quickly to Widgetbook in order to preview it. And we are doing so with an add use case annotation. This annotation requires a name. In this case, we just call it default because we only have one use case for now. And the type just comes with the user avatar. Then we're building our method in order to build our user avatar, which we are returning. In our case, we're also wrapping the user avatar with a center widget in order to align it centrally in Widgetbook. And building the boilerplate widget, as well as this use case, only takes 10 seconds. And afterwards, we get this preview once we run the build runner. As I said before, Widgetbook comes as a separate web app, as a separate Flutter app in your Flutter project. And right now we build it as a Flutter web build. But you could also build it as a desktop app, for example. Right now, what we can see here on the left side is that our user avatar was already added. For now, as we only included a placeholder, nothing is visible yet in the preview. So let's go ahead and implement the widget. As we already learned before how we can build reusable components, we are just writing our component in this way. And we are then extending our use case. So what we had to do now is we need to mock our properties. Before, our user avatar was previously parameterless, but now it requires 2 parameters. And therefore, you have to provide these 2 parameters for the use case so that Flutter is able to properly render it out. And for the image, we're using an image from the local file system here, which makes it easier to fill with mock data than fetching images from a CDN. Since this Widgetbook use case only depends on Flutter, the component itself, and Widgetbook, it is impossible to make bad decisions. You are building in isolation by default. So the mistakes that we've seen before cannot happen as long as you need to make an active decision to add these dependencies. Here we can see it live in action. So we can really see our user avatar component in isolation. And on the right side, we can now see our knobs and add-ons that allow us to test our widgets in all its different configurations. So let's go ahead and start with knobs. Knobs allow us to change our widgets dynamically on the fly. In our case with the user avatar, we previously provided the string mocks straight away. But with the knobs, what we're doing is we're writing context.knobs.datatype, in our case here string. We provide a label, in this case name, and an initial value, John Doe, that can then be dynamically overridden. We do the same with the photo URL. But in this case, we're using another data type, we're using string or null. And that means that if the photo URL is null, the component dynamically changes. And instead of a picture, a circle with the first letter of the first name is shown. Let's see it in action. What we can see here now is that we changed the name on the fly from John Doe to Jeff Jefferson, and we see also with a longer name, it looks still great. For the photo URL, it works exactly as we expected. The other feature that we have are add-ons. And Our add-ons allow us to test our widgets against global parameters set for the entire app. For example, for different device sizes or different themes. But you could also test different languages, different text scale factors, and much more. But in our case, we decided to test our widgets on different device sizes, so we can use our viewport add-on. So just by adding these few lines of code, we will be able to test our widgets on no device frame, iPhone 12 Pro Max, and iPad. With a few lines of code here, we can test our widgets on different themes. For example, light and dark mode. Let's see that in action as well. So what we can see now is when we change the viewport to an iPhone 12 or to an iPad, or we can also change it to having no device frame wrapped around it at all. And we can change our widget from light mode to dark mode. Now we got it for components, but how about entire screens? Can we add entire screens to Widgetbook? Yes, you can, and yes, you should. Here you can see the code of our screen. Let's go over this quickly without going too much into details. Our screen depends on our design system, which we just implemented. And this reuses the user avatar. We get our data from providers and fill the components with information. And this whole screen is the only component that has dependencies on providers, which we can see on our next screen. Here are the two different providers that we have. Afterwards, we're adding the use case so that we are able to add our screen into Widgetbook. In our case, we don't have a provider scope in the widget screen, in the widget tree, and that's why we inject it in the use case. And to avoid fetching data from our database, we use mocked providers. The current user provider has a hard-coded user because it's impossible to access this screen without being logged in. And for the user's provider, we use a fixed list of data. We build a custom knob for this provider to switch between the different states of the screen. And here we can now see our screen in action. So let's first have a look at the loading state, then at the error state, and finally the data state. This is most important and even interactive. So here we can now see all the fake data that we provided. And it works exactly as we imagined. When we as John Doe are now adding to the screen, we increase the value for John Doe and also for the entire counter. As a side benefit, we even receive our catalog. So whenever you are building your components in isolation with Widgetbook, you automatically receive a catalog of all of the different widgets that you have in your app. So it automatically creates a component library or design system for you while you're building your apps with Widgetbook. Let's sum up the benefits of the free open source Widgetbook. You can build your widgets in isolation. You can quickly test your widgets in all the different use cases, and you can make sure that all of your widgets are automatically decoupled from business logic and data, and all of your widgets are also cataloged in your own component library. And if you'd like to get started with Widgetbook, just check out our docs, docs.widgetbook.io, to get started. As a little hint, that's not it. Widgetbook is not only powerful for creating new components or screens, but also for changing existing ones. And as we can all see our widgets in Widgetbook's catalog, we have a great overview of all our existing widgets in all of their configurations, and can therefore easily use it to seeing new changes. And I'd love to show you how you can use Widgetbook Cloud to automatically find out what are the UI changes of your pull requests to make sure that you never ship unintended UI changes to your customers ever again. But this is coming in another video. Stay tuned.